The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. Jesus told his disciples a parable. Can a blind person guide a blind person? Will not both fall into a pit? No disciple is superior to the teacher, but when fully trained, every disciple will be like his teacher. Why do you notice the splinter in your brother's eye, but do not perceive the wooden beam in your own? How can you say to your brother, "Brother, let me remove that splinter in your eye," when you do not even notice the wooden beam in your own eye? You hypocrite! Remove the wooden beam from your eye first, then you will see clearly to remove the splinter in your brother's eye. A good tree does not bear rotten fruit, nor does a rotten tree bear good fruit. For every tree is known by its own fruit. For people do not pick figs from thorn bushes, nor do they gather grapes from brambles. A good person out of the store of goodness in his heart produces good, but an evil person out of a store of evil produces evil. For from the fullness of the heart, the mouth speaks. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Today's message is interesting, appropriate, in the midst of all that we see going on currently. Currently, you have a cancel culture that kind of wants to remove anything that doesn't fit someone's personal agenda, personal narrative, the disputes in Canada with the truckers, and the whole travesty in the Ukraine. The thing is you think about, as I preach, just see if you can find out where these tie into today's message. So let's consider the words from the Gospel. It says, "Remove the wooden beam from your eye first, then you will see clearly to remove the splinter in your brother's eye." Those interesting terms that he uses, that Jesus uses, we might think of it as, how can I find fault? How can I find fault in someone when I have not corrected my own faults? But Jesus takes this a step further. Instead of just saying, I have a splinter and he has a splinter, he uses that term beam, meaning a very large object, that's obscuring the vision. When I was younger and I would read this, it was kind of funny, the mental image you would get with someone, a 2x4 stuck in their eye. But the whole point is that it's obscuring the vision. It's very strong words. It's telling us we should evaluate ourselves first, long before we evaluate others. Basically, we should worry about cleaning up our own shed before we worry about the condition of the neighbor's shed. And we clean up ourselves. But this opens us up to questions that, when we think about it on our Christian walk, we have that obligation to help others stay on that same path towards salvation. We have that obligation. So would it mean that I can't say something to someone who's clearly drifted off the path? And they're walking in the wrong direction? Is it saying that? Do I not say words of reproof when they're necessary? Do I put off my responsibility to help my brother and sister walk towards salvation? No, I'm not perfect. None of us are, but it means I must have a beam in my eye, right? Because I'm not perfect. So what should we do in our Christian walk, in our Christian responsibility to help others if my vision is obscured? First thing that helps is if we put this into the context of how Jesus was saying it during the time. Because Jesus is observing the behavior of the Pharisees, who are well known to appear to be law-abiding Jews. They always hold themselves as being morally upright, to be in good favor with the Lord. And in that, they have the tendency to look down onto those who don't follow the law with the same rigor. Consequently, their religious talk becomes condescending. They force it down people's throat as a moral lesson, to these poor sinners who aren't as upright as me. This is what he's speaking to from the Pharisees' perspective. Is that Jesus' words are to grab them and to get their attention, to kind of stop them in their tracks so they listen. He isn't saying it so they don't follow the law. He's not trying to say that. But he's trying to tell them that they aren't above sin. He's using these words, these very shocking words, to the Pharisees so they can look into their own selves, into their own actions, and realize that they would be much better if they would look into and recognize their own weaknesses. And that with that recognition of their own weakness, they would be in that position to help others with love instead of condemning others with self-righteousness. So Jesus is not speaking out against this genuine intention to speak when we mean to help, when we mean to correct someone in error. He's not telling us not to do that, because that's our responsibility as Christians with our brothers and sisters. But however, the manner and the source from which we do this makes a lot of difference. You know, if we want to tell the neighbor to clean up our own shed, as I said earlier, we probably need to clean ours first to be that example, right? So this is what he's warning us today in this ancient gospel message, that we not to be self-righteous, to be aware of our hypocrisy, to avoid lording it over or judging others, to instead act gently, act tactfully to help them back on that path of holiness. You know, when it's apparent that they're off track, to reach out and to speak to them and to help them. So we're in this journey together. So how can we do this? How can we help without being that hypocrite, without being that judgmental? As I noted, we should be concerned when one of our brothers or sisters errs. You know, it helps to speak to them about it. Even ourselves, we make mistakes in our Christian faith, and it's good when people help us get back on that track. But the intention and the manner in which we talk to them is very critical. You know, we can't come off as self-righteous. You know, as I was preparing this, or maybe plagiarizing it, I'm not sure which, but as I was preparing this, I ran across a story, and the story was about chickens, so I had to include it because we have chickens. Anyway, so if we think about chickens, if we think about that rooster, that proud rooster who's lording it over his hens, you know, his nature is to be dominating, protective, to be the king of the roost. You know, he's out there crowing in the morning, and if there's other roosters nearby, he's going to have competition, who's going to be crowing the loudest. And it's even if it's 2 a.m., they don't really care. They don't have a clock. So don't get roosters. But they'll do this to you. So when he holds his head up high and he wants to be seen, and he wants people to see him, and he wants to see, and he wants to be that king of the roost, and that's how we see him. But if we take a second look, if we just look down to his feet, we can see that the rooster, like all the chickens, most likely standing in a pile with something that's less dignified than dirt. So he thinks he's so all important, but if you look down at his feet, he's standing in a pile of you know what. So we don't want to be like that rooster. We want to clean our feet, right? So this is what we have to be aware of when we seek to help someone else. We have to look down and see where we're standing, what we're standing in. You know, we have to approach this person first with the realization that we're sinners just like them, maybe worse than them, that, you know, I need more help than them when I approach someone. I'm probably worse than they are, trust me on that. So we're there to help them, and that we know we make the same mistakes they do. Sometimes I make more mistakes than they do. But once we embrace this, we embrace our humility and our humanity, then we have that realistic look of ourselves, and we can embrace that humility. You know, those thoughts of our own weaknesses and failures will help us to realize that we do have a beam in our eye, and that we really need help to remove it, and we can't really see what's going on. But that humility will help us remove it and help us clear our vision. Because once that's removed, we can safely see, we can safely approach and help others. You know, so realization of our own humanity and our own humility will help ensure that we're not approaching in judgment. We're approaching in truth and love. So we approach them as one who's genuinely helping. It's a shared journey. We're on a shared journey together towards salvation. And we need to help each other stay on that path and to stay focused. You know, this helps ensure that we approach with a helping hand in those shared struggles and those shared difficulties. You know, it's embracing our humility through that recognition of our own failures that opens our eyes to greater vigilance of the things around us. That veil is lifted, that beam is removed, and we can see things as God intended. And by seeing them as God sees them, having that vision that God sees the world, we can act in justice and help guide others and help guide ourselves, mostly, back onto that path of salvation. It's when we can clearly see. Like I mentioned in the beginning, I was talking about the things that are going on in the world. So many of these things are driven because someone has one vision of how it should be, and they want to force their own vision on everyone else without stepping back and looking at themselves and evaluating themselves and looking at the whole picture and pushing God out of it, but bringing God into it. Basically, looking at their shed before they tell someone to clean their shed. So we can work on this as ourselves, as individuals. We can fix these issues. We can't fix the big issues ourselves individually, but if we work on that focus in a smaller group, it can expand out. Our love and our sharing and our faith can expand out, and we share it to someone else, and they can share it to someone else. So as we begin to work on ourselves, we also begin to realize our own humanity and our own humility. And we'll begin to notice that we're not much different most of the time than that rooster. Because when we look at ourselves like God sees us and we have his vision and we look at our lives, it can be kind of scary. So with that humility, with that being removed, we can see, and then we can begin to reach out and to help others with their own splinters, with their own issues, to help them get back into that faith. It's just one bit at a time. All we have to do is get that one person back, even if that person is ourselves. And once we're back on that path of holiness, then that's a great service. It's a great act of truth and holiness. So it's important to get out there. Look at where we're standing, open our hearts to the truths and the vision of God, and to see the world as it is, to see the world as God sees it, and to use that humility, use that vision to bring others along. And as we approach Lent, one important thing we can do is to clear ourselves and to help is to get into the confessional booth back there. And it's behind them, it's in front of you all. But you can jump in there, when the priest is in there, of course, and confess your sins to Jesus and clean yourself and clean your shed, so to speak, or clean your feet if you're the rooster, and then begin to take that love and that cleanliness and that hope and that purity and share it with someone else. Not only is it a great victory that when we get ourselves in there once, but it's even just as great a victory if we can have someone else get in there because of our suggestion and our help. Okay? Amen.